Welcome to the Point Noted podcast with your host, Johnny B, and co-host who shows up whenever he wants to, former NFL player Rashad Barksdale. It's raw, unfiltered, and no topic is off limit. We talk sports, entertainment, culture, and a whole lot of random shit. Let's get to the point.
Point Noted podcast. You're hanging out with your host, Johnny B. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. So today on the show, we have an activist, an artist, journalist. This man's fighting for everything justice. And truly, I appreciate his fight. Y'all go ahead and welcome Awkword to the show. My man, Awkward, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
So you go by Awkward?
Yeah.
How long you been going like that?
I'm going to say probably... I don't at least 15 years.
Oh, and where did your name come from?
Honestly, it was more of a reaction, or like acknowledgement that, you know, the music that I create and the work that I do, awkward is an understatement for a lot of people, but I'm representing people who don't feel necessarily that they, for one reason or another, can't voice their experiences themselves.
Right.
And, you know, I was an awkward kid growing up. I felt
really
alienated, and, you know, the way that, like, the place that I grew up in was rich and conservative and, you know, racist and homophobic and so, and, you know, and I'm a working class, like I come from a working class leftist family. And so, you know, like by the time that you know, at first it was anger and fighting and, you know, any Nazi I saw, I punched in the face. And,
wow.
And then I kind of figured out a way to be more like proactive and positive and, you know, like trying to liberate people instead of, you know, adding more violence. And that's kind of how I found myself. So when I, you know, started rapping, it kind of made sense to, like, you know, as a throwback to the person I used to be and, you know, representing those people who haven't made that kind of jump in themselves the way that I did.
Right. Did your personality change once you start rapping?
No.
Like what happened to your personality and what happened to your confidence?
Yeah, I mean, you know, my confidence grew probably, you know, alongside, like I would definitely, like I've said before, that hip hop saved my life. You know, I would say that, you know, between seeing the power of music and the power of words, and finding an expression, a way to express myself that wasn't violent, you know, prevented me from being killed or ending up in prison. And, you know, that along with guidance from my mom before she died. You know, she was a therapist and she was an activist, so she kind of taught me a lot. And my confidence just grew over time. Probably, you know, I wouldn't say directly, you know, because I was rapping, but certainly there's nothing, you know, there's no harm in getting off stage and having people bum rush you. You know, that definitely doesn't hurt.
Right. Do you remember the first song you made?
Oh man. I don't know. I mean, yeah, like I definitely made some like early songs. I guess, you know, I was freestyling and like doing what everybody else does for years, but when I
Right.
wasn't it wasn't until I was probably like 18 or something, because I'm older, I'm 38 now. And back then, you know, the availability, the access of like easy recording material, you know, equipment was not there. You know, now you could record on your phone, or you can just buy like, you know, a cheap mic and like it doesn't even sound that bad. You could record, you know, on GarageBand that comes for free, you know, and all these things. I didn't have that capability back then. So, you know, I don't think I started recording until I was about 18. And, you know, I didn't really know like how to write a song yet either. It was more just like rapping poetry that I had written almost. And then over time, I kind of I taught myself and some other people like just learning from other people in the studio and stuff, like learning how to construct, you know, learning how to construct verses and hooks and like real songwriting. Um, I think probably like the first song that I ever released that, you know, I actually did a video for at Mars Bar on the in the East Village in New York City before it closed down.
Mm,
That was called The People's Champ, and you know, I kind of went with that like catchphrase for a while. And then as I got older, you know, I realized that there's a lot of kind of arrogance in a concept like that, and you know, I don't want to feel like I don't want to front like I believe that I am the champ for the people, more that I am a voice for the people, you know what I mean? And
right.
as my like politics and mindset and philosophies have kind of expanded and gotten deeper, you know, so is my music.
Right, right. Do you when you do your music, what do you find easier about making a song? Is it the beginning process where you trying to like that hot moment where you trying to write something and something come out like hot? Is that like a process for you? Like usually get that?
When I was still living in New York City, and I was, you know, before I was married and had kids, I was, you know, constantly either in the studio or I was at shows or I was out on the street and I was just in
Mm,
the thick of it. So I always had, you know, lines and concepts and things, and I was just doing it every day. You
right.
know, now that you know, I spend a lot of time doing other things, like activist work and digital strategy and writing and all, and, you know, journalism and all these other things. So it's a lot more like there's a lot more thought that goes into when I decide like I want to actually do a song, you know. I released an album in 2014 called Worldview that, you know, I spent 5 years creating. Um,
Mm,
and since then, I've only released like, you know, maybe 5 songs over the last 5 years. And I have another one coming out very shortly, about, you know, police and prison abolition and justice in this country. And, you know, I did one after a long hiatus called Fuck Trump, or really called Heather Heyer. She was the woman, the activist who was run over and killed in Charlottesville at the Unite the Right, you know, counter protest. Run
okay.
over by a Nazi, and you know, that moment just inspired me, and I just made sure it happened. And when I'm inspired, the writing part is easy; it just flows naturally, and it just happens. But being able to like set myself apart from everything else I'm doing, including being a dad, you know, that part, you know, actually sitting down to get started, that's the hardest part, you know, finding the time and getting the space to do that. But as with my activism and everything else, I just am like, all right, I need this time. Like I need to do this. And once, you know, the for the song 10 Demands I'm doing, you know, Jesse Jett made the beat and the hook. I asked him to do that for me, and it's, you know, he's a great singer, and a leftist like myself. So it's all ready for me. As soon as I sit down and actually do it, it'll be done probably in an hour.
Nice. Nice. Look at you, man. My man's putting on work, doing music, doing activists, everything, man. But since you mentioned, you brought up, by the way, Vic joined us
Hey,
already.
what's
What's
going
up,
on,
Vic?
man? I'm sorry about that.
All right. It's all
Hey,
good.
how you
You're
doing, Mr.
here.
Awkward?
Um,
Good, man.
I'm
How are
doing all
you?
right, thank you. Pleasure to be with
Yeah,
you.
thanks for joining us. Yeah, yeah, same
Yes,
here.
sir.
yeah, he finally joined us after trying to get on with that boo boo connection he
Right,
got over
right.
there.
I'm just
You know,
location right here. I'm in the
so.
suburbs now, so the connection is not always right. So
But yeah, so awkward. So you brought up the 10 demands and 10 what was the 10 for justice. So let's talk about that. What is the 10 demands?
So 10 Demands for Justice is a call for abolition of police and prisons. It sets a roadmap, a realistic actionable roadmap to get to that point with, actionable steps, things that we can start doing right now, and some of the things that are starting to happen across the country. So, for example, a lot of people are calling to defund the police. We absolutely support that. And by we, I mean this coalition that started in late May of 2020, that we've named 10 Demands, that was created kind of organically, about 12 of us who put these demands together. And, for us, defunding the police is like step one. Do
Mm.
that right now. We start defunding and demilitarizing the police. And there's a lot of other aspects to this, decriminalizing poverty and, and holding police accountable. And as we move along, making sure that all cops who commit crimes are fired and all departments that, violate civil rights are dismantled. We defund the departments and the police officers down to zero. We've set the stage for abolishing police, and prisons goes right along with that. We have a number of actionable steps for, defunding prisons. There's no reason we should have corporations profiting off of prisons. So there should be no private prisons. There should be no corporations earning, obscene amounts of money on the backs of slave labor. There's a ton of people we can free right away. We could free the elderly, the immunocompromised, the disabled, nonviolent offenders. We could free, criminalized immigrants, people who are criminals just for being here. Criminalized survivors, for mostly women who are in jail or prison for, standing up to their abuser finally. We end cash bail. 7 out of 10 people in jail in this country have not been convicted of a crime. So we end cash bail. We completely free up the jails. We believe that local jails should be, abolished right now. But as I said, yeah, there are 10 demands that I think all taken together set a really, actionable and essential stage for the changes that need to happen in this country. As we face generations of racism and classism and policing, prosecution and sentencing.
Okay, so what you just said, you mentioned we should, we should like take away cash bail, and local officers should not have a jail, local state should not have a jail. So my question to you then is, you're saying, so when you catch a criminal, what are we doing with that criminal? Would we just let him go, put him on probation, and stay at home,
So we
put
want
a monitor around their ankles? What are we doing?
Well, we want to end the carceral system. So nothing like what you kind of suggested would happen overnight. We're not looking
Of course.
to all of a sudden have, for one thing, no matter when this we're talking about, we're not talking about anarchy. We're not talking about no people not being held responsible for their actions. But certainly in the immediate term, we're not talking about the current systems still being what they are, and all of a sudden people can commit what are still considered crimes and just not have repercussions. So
Right,
those
right.
things that we want to start happening right now. So as we defund and demilitarize the police, those billions and trillions of dollars can go toward programs that are designed to prevent crime, to educate, for wellness checks and peacekeepers, for mediation, rehabilitation, and reparative justice. And we envision a society where we've thought outside the prison box. Crime and punishment in this society is thought about in a certain way. People are born and just, from day one, it's just understood that this is the way it is. But that wasn't always the case. Prisons were created, as a response to, the people realizing that they don't want to publicly stone and hang people anymore. And the term penitentiary came from the concept of penitence. What has happened, though, is we've developed this prison industrial complex where certain communities, post-slavery are criminalized, and certain other people are profiting off of their criminalization. So we want to remove the profit motive, and we want to decriminalize a lot of the things that actually don't have real victims. We want to make changes like repealing 3 strikes laws, where a guy doesn't end up in prison for decades for stealing a piece of pizza because he committed 2 crimes before that one. Ending the school to prison pipeline by repealing truancy laws and removing police and surveillance technologies from schools. 1 in 3 Black boys born today is going to end up in prison, and that's because it's set up that way. So
Damn, that's high.
it's crazy.
That's a crazy number right there.
Yeah. And then you look at things like, 40% plus of police officers beat their wives. Those are just the ones who are brave enough.
Wait, hold up. Say what?
More than 40% of police officers have been found guilty of abusing their partners. So
Wow.
that's just the ones whose partners have been brave enough to
reported it, right?
Okay. And then you take it a step further. Most murders, because people always say, what about the rapists and the murderers, right? In this country, most murders are committed, and all crimes for that matter, are committed by people who know the people they're committing this crime against. It's rare when it's considered a stranger murder, and 1/3 of all stranger murders in this country are committed by cops. So as soon as we get rid of cops, we're ending a ton of the murder and violence in this country, and not the other way around. But then, of course,
okay. So, all right, I have to ask on that. Hold on, Vic, 1 second. So, because it says something, I don't want to forget this real quick. You just get the numbers out of saying basically cops are just criminals in legal uniforms. That's what it sounds like to me. And you want us to do without cops, right?
Right.
So, because when someone is listening to that, they're thinking, so who's going to protect my grandma? Who's going to protect my house?
Yeah.
So can you follow with that? If we canceling, taking away police officers and things like that, what are we doing for security?
Right. I mean, that is, again, requires thinking outside of this structure that is so deeply ingrained in all of us. This country is really good, through the media, of creating social scares and moral panics. We go through periods where we focus on one thing or another. The amount of serial killers out there, it's less than 1% of crime, or probably even 1% of murder. So there aren't a lot of serial killers who are going to come murder you. When it comes to the concept of security, the best way to keep your grandma safe is to make sure she lives in a community that is safe. And putting cops there where, regardless of a person's prior criminal activity, being stopped by cops actually predicts an increase in future criminal behavior. So having more cops there patrolling and making people nervous and criminalizing them with petty arrests is not making your neighborhood safer. What would be improving public schools, would be ensuring that not just rich people have access to substance abuse treatment and counseling, free healthcare for everybody, programs for intervention and skills-based training. And again, having people like peacekeepers who are doing wellness checks on your grandma and people who may be have mental illness or something like that. This is how we make sure that people are getting the needs getting their needs met, getting the services they need. People aren't going to commit crime. People don't choose to commit crimes. They do in the moment, but they're put in a place where that's their only option. And we want to remove those options. We want to make their only options to contribute positively. Of course, that doesn't mean all crime is going to go away. And we do believe that there should be repercussions. They're just a different type of repercussion. Instead of criminalizing entire communities and calling certain people evil, we want to hold you responsible, like, for your human duty. And it is your duty as someone who is offended or hurt another person to repair that broken connection, that, the crime, so to speak, that you have committed that has a victim. The crazy part is, most people assume that victims, are desperate to just incarcerate, electrocute, whatever, anyone who's harmed them, when in reality, research shows that victims of crime themselves prefer investments in education, jobs, and drug and mental health treatment over prisons and jails.
Right.
Not to mention that most people who are perpetrators of crimes have been victims themselves. So we need to create, with all this extra money we're going to have, by defunding and demilitarizing, because, like, they don't need tanks and rocket launchers. We'll be able to put that into our communities, starting with those that are most impacted by the war on drugs, mass incarceration, and police violence, to improve these communities so that crime is not going to be as common as it is today.
So I have a quick question. I have to say I do appreciate you saying that. So two questions I have. One is about Joe Biden as for getting elected for, or at least being on the ballot here for the Democrat to elect him as the next president, right? So which hopefully, if everything works out, that will be the next president of the United States, and we can get this current president out of office. But I've heard that a lot of things, him trying to appeal to both sides of the aisle, where when he's talking about this whole defunding the police, and he doesn't stand for defunding the police, and not just him, but when you think about other elected officials who are now following people, at least this current movement where we are requesting for the defunding of the police. Now, what is your stance on what we should do when we have people who we have no other choice? Is either we select Trump for president or Joe Biden for president, right? So what should we do when we are now asking who should we as a people vote for president in this kind of situations where we have no choice? Or how do we hold those elected officials accountable to us in that situation? That's one of my questions. And the second one is that, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but I wanted to hear from your point of view, where you being a white guy, right? So as a white man, you tend to hear, as a black man, I tend to, whenever I'm arguing this, so the same stance that you are arguing, I tend to hear people saying, well, black people do kill more black people. Like, look at Chicago, there was 100 and some people got killed during July 4th weekend. Last weekend, 60 something people got killed. Now, that's always the distraction whenever it comes to this conversation that we're having. So you as a white man, what is your how would you react, or what would you say when it comes to a conversation about bringing black on black crimes to this whole defunding the police movement and stopping the systemic racism going on in the country?
Yeah. So in regard to the first question, I mean, I think you were, you stated a fact that we only have two choices. And I think you suggested that they're not very good options. I mean, Biden is way worse though than you even, that you even said. Like, he's not just against defunding the police. He wants to give police more money. He is against Medicare for all. He and I don't align on anything. He's the one who created mass incarceration with his crime bill. So to me, the only difference between the two is that he's not an all-out Nazi, and he's senile, and he's incredibly bumbling and stupid and embarrassing. But he is not going to go on Twitter and try to incite as much violence from Nazis as he possibly can. That's how I see the difference, and it's a really unfortunate situation that those are our choices. So, years ago, I was part of a group that lobbied New York State Congress for the repeal of the Rockefeller drug laws, and it worked. So, they're a corporate lobby.
For those who don't know, though, what is the Rockefeller drug law?
Well, the Rockefeller drug laws were part of a much larger, situation in this country where we basically made it so that certain drugs and certain people were criminalized in a completely different way than other people. This was for New York State in specifically, but so if you basically they were minimum mandatory sentences. So, if you had a certain amount of a drug, you could face a minimum of 15 years to life in prison and a maximum of 25 years to life in prison. And that's for a nonviolent offense. That's simply for possession. And drugs, are, for one thing, in moderation, not inherently problematic. But not to mention that people who are addicts and then who might commit crimes of desperation due to their addiction have a disease. We should not be incarcerating people with illnesses. So it was part of the larger war on drugs. And one way that, to give you an example of how certain segments of society were criminalized, is you used to have 100 times as much of powder cocaine than you did of crack cocaine to get the same sentence. Now, after a law that was passed, I think in 2014 or 2015, it's still 20 times greater of a sentence for crack cocaine. That's because certain people have crack and they want to make sure that the white rich people who have the powder, which is essentially, it comes from the same drug, will not get the same sentence if for some reason they happen to get a prosecutor and judge who actually wants to, sentence, convict them, when in most cases they'll just get off, right? If they have enough money. So in other words, so I say that to say that, lobbying is not inherently bad. Lobbyists represent interests of groups of people, and there are lobbying groups who represent the needs of real people. I'm certainly against corporate lobbyists, and the same corporations that give to certain politicians to vote certain ways are also, for what it's worth, giving to police foundations. And this money is used to militarize police departments. But of course, like lobbying on behalf of oppressed peoples is something that can be very valuable. And I'll never forget being told by one state congressperson, we don't need to make changes. All you just need to pull yourselves up from the bootstraps, which is
Right.
absurd cliche. And he was such a schmuck. The reality is that, like, he was white, he was privileged, he was unwilling to recognize systemic racism in education, healthcare, real estate, wages, and everything else, or the fact that we're not that many generations away from slavery and then chain gangs and Jim Crow. So I say, so lobbying is one thing. I also think that no matter who the president is, like, people like me, who are demanding full abolition, are like the Malcolm to the Martins, who are saying, like, please defund by X amount of money, or we need to stop police brutality. During the civil rights era, today we look at Martin Luther King as a collective society in a very incorrect way. He was anti-capitalist and a lot more radical than neoliberals like to give him credit for. But what the greater society during the civil rights movement saw was someone who wanted peaceful marches. And so they were willing to negotiate and give him what he was asking for because they were terrified of the Black Panther Party and Malcolm X. So, the way that I look at it now is that we need to keep protesting on the streets. We need, the Black Lives Matter movement needs Antifa and, needs white allies. And the more scared they are of full revolution, the more likely they are to implement other changes that will lead us in a positive direction. And that's why, what's that? Yeah, word. I mean, and that's why we created 10 for Justice, because, we intend to send these demands to all the Congress people across the country so that they can look at this and say, well, I don't necessarily think I can end the carceral state. That's demand 10. oh, but I do see here you're recommending that we free this segment of society right now. That seems reasonable to me. I'm going to push for that because I want to get reelected, not because I actually care, but X percentage of my constituency is black or poor. And you know what? They're not going to vote for me anymore. And I think that's another real value of getting behind down ballot progressives. We are spending a lot of time and effort in getting them the funding that they need and getting their messages out there because we have two terrible choices at the federal level. Things can get done on the state and local levels if you elect the right people, and it's easier to elect progressives on those levels. So that's the long answer to the first one. The second one, is a really great question. There are people who, and honestly, I am not necessarily the right person to be lead. I'm not the right person to be leading a march for Black Lives. I am representing a group with 10 demands, a multicultural, multiracial group where, we conferred heavily, internally, certainly, but also externally to make sure that we really represented the Black community, the brown community, the indigenous communities. So I'm kind of a spokesperson, one, because I am familiar with this territory. As a hip hop artist and a public figure, I do a lot of interviews, so it makes sense to have me talking about it. But I'm not just speaking on behalf of myself, and I'm not speaking for anyone who hasn't made it clear to me what their unique and individual community-based demands are. I say all that because, like, the same as how I've been treated in hip hop, I am honest about who I am. I'm honest about my privilege. I'm honest about white guilt. I wasn't born. I didn't ask to be born. Like none of us did. And as a Jew who experienced a ton of anti-Semitism growing up, that was probably the first way that I so strongly identified with other people who have experienced oppression. So and for what it's worth, Jews represent 0.2% of the world's population and actually are more than 50% of all hate victims of more than 50% of all hate crimes in this country. So the oppression of my people isn't over either. So I can truly empathize and I can truly understand, while understanding also that unlike a person of color, I can pass. No one looks at me and says, "Oh, you're a Jew." I can get away with being just a regular white guy. So everything I say is with that understanding. But I think there's a really, really easy answer for all of these fascists and racists who are telling you, look at black on black crime. Whites kill more whites, blacks kill more blacks, Latinos kill more Latinos because you kill the people in your community. It's that simple. So,
Very simple. I agree.
I mean, that's really the answer. And the only reason they're saying this is because they don't like black people. They don't care about you. And they're using a racist trope the same way that anti-Semitic tropes are thrown against me all the time.
See, I really appreciate that. So speaking of anti-Semitism, right? I'm sure everyone knows what's going on all over now with Deshaun Jackson. I mean, Deshaun
Yeah.
Jackson with Nick Cannon, and,
Yeah.
just and so my personal take on that also is that at least speaking about Deshaun Jackson and Louis Farrakhan. So I have somebody that I was someone who, until recently, I never actually tried to listen to what Louis Farrakhan had to say. I didn't know who this man was. I've heard about him so many times, but it was always brought up in a terrorism uh, like to me. So I always just thought it was one of these guys who just preached hate. So recently when I started listening to him, and I felt like, well, I don't agree 100% with what this man had to say, but at least I can say is that a lot of the things that he said, I resonated with them. It made sense to me as a black man in America. It felt like this man was pushing things that would make life better for me as a black man and every other black man, requesting for equality and letting people see and understand things that the way they really were. Now, although I'm sure he has some stands that everyone doesn't agree with. Like even I myself, talking to even Johnny B over here and some of my friends, like I had like a list of things where the last time we had a podcast, I was actually suggesting, just like you said, we had a list of demands, and at the very end of that demand should be this marching and protesting, where even if violence was happening during those marches, where not violence is harming people, but where things were getting burnt and things were being looted, I said, if you have that on the list of things where this are the possibility of what could happen, it will make people take you more serious when you're looking at the end results of we have demands 1 to 20. If you don't give us one, then we
Mhm.
move to 2 and 3. By the time it gets down there, when we don't get all of these demands, we can be at a point where we're mobilizing each other to say it's time to march. And regardless of if
Yeah.
Antifa is there, if Black Lives Matters, I don't care who it is, and whatever happens during those marches, if we are not getting what we want and what we need to get, I support that whole protesting, and to the point where even if it leads to burning and looting, if that's what it takes for you to hear us and to change stuff, because our lives currently are being burnt, our lives are being looted every single day. Black people are perishing and lives are being destroyed, and not just the people's lives, but their children's lives, families, and things like that are all being destroyed. You know, so I look at it from that point of view is when you hear a man like Louis Farrakhan and people who has been talking about him like Deshaun Jackson, I mean, and Nick Cannon, what are your takes on that? Being a Jewish man yourself,
Yeah. I think it's really unfortunate that currently he is the most uh, empowering black leader, because I am 100% in favor of black power. I'm 100% in favor of justice and equality. And if I were black, I you know, I can't imagine being, I can't imagine how angry I would be. Um, I think black people have every right to go to my community, like my as a white guy, not literally, but like, whatever community it is that you don't live in, and go loot and burn that community. You know what I mean? Like, the people who are oppressing you should feel you. And so I support everything you're saying. And it's what I was saying earlier too about like the Malcolm and Martin thing. If you show them like it's going to get worse if you don't listen, they're going to be scared enough that they will listen. It's about coming together as a people, and and demanding change, not reform, not things that just strengthen the systems that that are holding people, but certain people back, and look pretty on the outside, but actual fundamental change, dismantling of the racist systems. Um, and I wish there was someone other than Louis Farrakhan, because he is a virulent anti-Semite. He calls Jews the devil. He so and for what it's worth, a couple decades ago, Louis Farrakhan met with the Ku Klux Klan. The Nation of Islam met with the Ku Klux Klan to brainstorm how to handle the Jewish problem,
wow,
the same way Hitler did. So he is not the person who I want to be leading you. Every group needs a leader, and he's a really bad one, because he is sowing discord between two groups who are oppressed and two groups who have historically worked together. Everyone who tells you that Jews run the world, everyone who tells you that, all we care about is money, they're lying to you. We are not the racists. It is the Christian white people who are the racists. Jews were forced into money lending because it was considered the worst job you can have. 2.2%, less than 1% of the entire world isn't capable of running the entire world. This, like, Jews have been facing oppression for thousands of years, and to have someone who has all of these great messages ruin them by speaking about us specifically is so unfortunate. Um, you know, so I will never support Louis Farrakhan. I think he's incredibly problematic, and he's distracting you guys from what the real needs are. Like, you should get it. You should be empowered, and you should be marching, and you should get justice. But he shouldn't be the one to be leading you. So because I constantly get that from people on Twitter, because no one's brave enough to say things to your face these days. My response is always to post. I don't even say anything. Oh, actually, I say a little thing. I post a picture of Jews who look like Jews holding a Torah, marching with Martin Luther King, and a guy behind him with a shotgun. I post that famous photo and I say, "Are these the Jews you're talking about?" Because what he's saying about us is bullshit.
Wow, that is powerful because until today, until you actually mentioned this, I actually did not know that about the Jews. I did not know they were actually participated in the march with Black people, in Martin Luther King's times. I personally am one whose my stance has always been, regardless of who you are, if you are looking for equality, then you do not use your position to to like look down on the other group or to actually perpetrate the same thing that you are fighting for
Sure.
against another group, right? That's my own personal take on
Sure.
that. So I have never supported that. But like you do say, is that anyone who listens to, at least if you're a Black person listening to Louis Farrakhan, you see that, or you do hear, he has a lot of great points, that um resonates with an African American man like myself. But at the same time,
Mhm.
we all uh, we don't have leaders. The leaders we have always get killed. The Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X, even as much as you might hear from him, they get murdered. And when they get murdered,
Yeah.
we're left with no one but this kind of guy. So when the absence of leadership, we
Don't
don't
you
get
think
anywhere,
it's
right?
interesting? Don't you think it's interesting that he's still around? Why do you think
I
that
actually
is?
think it is very interesting. I,
It's because the power holders who are not Jewish, who hate me just like they hate you, are thrilled to have someone like him who's making sure that we can't work
right,
together. During the civil rights era, there was a group that worked alongside, a lot of the Black organizations called Students for a Democratic Society. They were incredibly violent and radical and revolutionary, and they were Jews. So, people need to do their research. I don't hold it against anyone who doesn't know because, like, how could you know if the only time you hear about us is in this negative way? Why Farrakhan doesn't just say the white man, which is the truth, the straight white rich man, then like that would be more effective and more accurate. Why he's picking on a people there's so few of us left, like 13 million people were murdered by Hitler. Like, why pick on us? It's really inaccurate and unhelpful.
I do agree, because I mean, realistically, one thing that resonates with me is that when you think about the KKK movement, they're always chanting Jews will not replace us and African Americans will not
Right.
replace us. So I fundamentally refuse to agree with anything the KKK. I mean, like I refuse to agree with them on anything at all. So for me, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So even if I do not know anything about the Jews, I've always understood a few things from the Bible, and also I'm a Christian, so I'm not a Muslim or in the part of the Nation of Islam. From the Bible, and
Mhm.
also from the fact that if the people who are perpetrating hate all around the world can keep saying the Jews will not replace us, that blacks will not replace us, then at least it lets me understand that they hate them just as much as they hate them as much as they hate me. So, and
Yeah,
I understand from that
exactly.
point. Yes.
Actually, I just want to clarify. I'm pretty sure that I got it wrong about the Nation of Islam meeting with the KKK. I'm actually remembering that it was the American Nazi Party, which, depending on your beliefs, like could be even
Right.
worse. I mean, they're
Yeah,
literally
I
called
think they're
Nazis.
both like in the same ballpark, if you ask.
They're all
Yeah.
terrible. And also for what it's worth, like I support Muslim people. There's a huge difference also between the Nation of Islam and Muslim people, and Islam as a religion. So that's a really important distinction as well. Not all Muslims are terrorists. Not all Muslims are Nation of Islam, and not all Arabic people are even Muslims. There are Arabic Christians and Arabic Jews. I'm a quarter Palestinian myself. So there's a lot of things that are just only known to the smallest degree that really manipulate the way people think.
Right.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that the world just needs education a lot more.
For sure.
I think there's too many people out there who just don't know history. So just going by the word of somebody else that you heard, and it's not good for anybody.
Yep.
So let's switch gear real quick. What's going on out there in Portland? So first of all, the news is not really talking about protests no more. It's all COVID right now.
Right.
And I understand that. So you're really not looking at the news from a different view. You're not going to know there's still folks out there protesting.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on out there in Portland? This is kind of getting crazy out there, isn't it?
Yeah. One thing I'll say is that it's not even just happening in Portland. Portland is getting a lot of the attention because most recently Trump sent Homeland Security there. There's Trump and his group has sent collections of all kinds of militant policing forces that are taking over for what is already a problematic and dangerous and violent local and state police force. So there's National Guard, there's FBI, there's Homeland Security. There are groups I've probably never heard of. In Minneapolis, there's a very now pretty infamous video of state police and National Guard rolling through a suburban neighborhood, screaming, "Light them up," and shooting at people on their porches for no reason. They're on their own porches. So this kind of,
Yeah, I said that. I said that online as well. It's just terrible.
So there's this military intervention across the country. It's incredibly dangerous that the mainstream media is doing what is expected. At a time when crime was plummeting, mainstream media reporting on murder and other crimes skyrocketed. They are not interested in telling us the truth. They're interested in reporting the things that their corporate owners want them to report. So it's a miracle that nowadays we have things like Twitter and independent journalists and citizen journalists. And that's the way people need to learn. That's the way people can get their information. So I think it's incredibly valuable that we have this. In Portland specifically, people are being not only beaten and gassed and shot the way they are in all 50 states, as this is the biggest uprising we've ever had, including the civil rights movement. They are also flat out disappearing people. And one of our
What do you mean disappearing people? Like kidnapping them?
Yes. And this is one of our 10 demands is ending all strategic counter protest violence. That includes ending all anti-protest laws, ending all of these disbursement methods, freeing everyone who is rotting in jail or prison for exercising their constitutional rights to protest. And I've been tagging my friend constantly, whose name is Mike Schmidt. He's the new DA in Portland, in that county, and he's actually coming from an incredible perspective. He's a leftist himself, and I'm just telling him, you got to get started, man. Things need to change now. He's looking to defund the police. He's looking to decriminalize a ton of things that should not be crimes out there. So we need to keep reporting it, keep re-reporting it, share it with everybody we know, and don't get afraid. Keep protesting. Support mutual aid efforts, support bail funds, support organizations that are helping get healthcare to people who are injured. These are the ways to support each other as we maintain this revolution. And in the meantime, like as this happens, we need to elect more people like Mike, who are going to try to change things as best they can from the inside.
And I definitely do agree with that because I think one thing I had to like just is that to um, a lot of people from the Republican side typically would say, "Oh, African Americans tend to vote for people who are Democrats," and they do have a point in that because we as African Americans tend to think that that's the party that would cater to our needs, that would actually work in favor of us and try to change things. But like you did say, Joe Biden was the one who started a bill that led to the mass incarceration, and Bill Clinton was the president during the time where even though it started before him, it led to like ridiculous amount of mass incarceration of African American people. It was during Bill Clinton's time that we African American men were declared as predators. So from my point of view, I've noticed that not every Democrat is the same. So, what type of Democrat
Yeah.
should we look for, or what should we look for in the Democrats or the people? Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure there are some Republicans that are not racist or that have the best intentions at heart, but they just fundamentally disagree with some of the things that the Democrats agree with. So, what should we look for in the people that we should elect into those positions, and how do we make them change the rules? Because I found out also that some of these rules, you don't get to vote on this. It's the people that you vote into the office that actually put these laws into place by whatever means that they do on their end. So how should we, or what would your advice be to African American men and the young white men and Hispanics who actually join us in this movement to pick the people that we vote for and that can benefit us, and how to make that happen?
I think as individuals, I think, and I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I think it's interesting. Maybe it's because the three of us are men, but the abolitionist movement has historically been led by Black women feminists, who are, also, probably even in a lot of ways, maybe even worse than men, discriminately, you know, oppressed by the current system. So, as individuals in our daily lives, in our organizations, in our businesses, we need to empower Black women. That's one thing. When it comes to who we elect and everything, I'm sure it's possible, and I'm sure they exist. There are Republicans who, and I don't agree with any of this, but there are Republicans who maybe aren't racist, who just want to vote Republican because they are, for religious reasons, think it's, murder to have an abortion.
Right.
I don't know, whatever. Sure, it's possible that there are Republicans who aren't racist, um, but it doesn't make it untrue that Democrats are better for the poor. They are better for Black people. They are better for brown people, even though an exorbitant number of Latin Americans vote Republican. Um, so they're better for the 99%. But as you said, not every Democrat is the same. It's not even like that. Like that is an understatement. You can have a Joe Biden and a Jason Call from Washington in the same party. Just shows like how incredibly wide the gap can be. The establishment Democrats are centrist at best. The moderates, and if you see someone calling themselves a centrist or a moderate, almost all of the people who've been in government for decades in the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi very much included, they are more Republican than what we believe Democrats really value. Um, if you see someone calling themselves a progressive, and they are for Medicare for all, they're for canceling student debt, they're for affordable housing for all, they're for a Green New Deal, they're for economic justice, they're for real criminal justice, not bullshit reform. They're for rights for women, for the disabled, for LGBTQ. These are the progressives. These are the real politicians, yes, but candidates and a few sitting members who are actually working for the people. And the only way to, I think, to get more of them elected is to volunteer, to knock on doors, to email people, to have conversations with everyone you know, to use Twitter to spread the messages. To find rich people who can donate to their campaigns, and to continue to scare the shit out of the establishment. So, and to inform the general public. So these people who are still looking to change things from within the system are not seen as so radical in comparison to someone who's, a black man who's walking down the street with a gun, demanding equality and justice. Like electing some white guy in Washington who wants to defund the police is a lot less scary, you know. So like some have been elected. I think overall I've been disappointed. A lot of them this election cycle have not won. Great candidates have not won. But it doesn't mean we stop. And there's always another cycle. And so, it's just a matter of putting your time and money and energy into giving them the support they need to overcome the insane amount of power and money that the corporate owned politicians have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I understand that, and you definitely been putting a lot of
And
time into supporting those cause and things like that. So definitely I appreciate that. So talk about everything, like just in general. How's the process going for you? Being able to get your voice heard, being able to get out there and trying to impact and be supportive of the right thing, which can also bring attention to your cause.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that working for you in trying to get attention and get your platform going?
Well, I think my music has always been one way that I've done that. Most of my songs, and certainly more so now than when I started, and with the less frequent, the infrequency that I release music, it's all very targeted and strategic, and it's all political. Because I try to make music that can be listenable, enjoyable, entertaining, and empowering, and inspiring, and educational, all at the same time. Music, as Martin Luther King said, is the soul of a movement, and so I'm going
Right.
to keep doing that. In the meantime, I think interviews like these are very helpful. Because getting my message out to your audience expands it, amplifies it. When it comes to my overarching goals, I'm less interested in like people hearing of Awkward and knowing what I look like than I am of people understanding what abolition means, and that we at 10 Demands through 10 for Justice have literally laid out a roadmap for how this can be implemented starting right now. And also on the website 10forjustice.com, we have a whole page dedicated to explaining the society we envision post abolition, and how it would actually work to implement these demands. We have another section with tons of resources from the incredible people who have been doing this for, some for as long as me, like the last 2 decades, some for for much longer. People like Mariam Kaba, Dereka Purnell, and Angela Davis. We have tons of resources where people can get educated so they don't just continue to spread lies and disinformation that people who are abolitionists are looking for anarchy and lack of accountability and things like that. So, I think we've been pretty successful in getting the message out there. After over a month of working on the 10 Demands, we released them on June 25th. And on that day, there were I think almost 5,000 tweets about it. I was featured on Nomiki Kant's show. Justin Hunt from Hip Hop DX and Revolt TV interviewed me. So we're getting the message out there. We just started distributing flyers, on a grassroots level so that protesters on the streets have them, and have something to rally around, like concrete steps for change. And as I hinted at, we really are aiming to, in the near future, develop this email campaign and mail campaigns so that people who are in leadership positions in government have these demands sitting in front of them, and can actually start to implement this stuff. So we're part of the way there. Seeing some states and cities and departments, whatever, like start to defund and demilitarize is a very positive sign. I don't think it would have happened before George Floyd's murder. So for whatever reason, that in the same way that Eric Garner's murder, we were able to capitalize on that horrible moment and get energized around I Can't Breathe and what happened in Ferguson. We're living through historic times, and we're one step closer, but we have a far way to go.
Right, we do. But as long as we keep going forward, eventually we'll get there. So go ahead and plug your social again for the folks that are listening. I think it was 10forjustice.com.
It's tenforjustice.com. It's TENFOR justice.com. The group Twitter account and Instagram account is 10 Demands, that also spelled out TEN Demands. And that is because we are now also working on other series of 10 Demands. So we started with 10 for Justice, but we're going to also work on 10 for Health and 10 for Education, because all of these things are interconnected. And it's our capitalist society that kind of puts the benefits of corporations ahead of people, that position all of us with inadequacies in education, in healthcare, and in how we handle justice. We're going to be working on that stuff as well. If you want to reach out to me directly, I'm at thisisawkward.com. It's AWKWORD. And on all the socials, it's Awkward Rap, AWKWORD RAP.
Nice. As my man Awkward, man, came and share some knowledge, drop some knowledge on us. And hopefully we all learn something, and folks can go ahead and follow my guide online and get some more knowledge and show support to his cause. Hey, Awkward, man, appreciate you for stopping by, man.
Thank you.
Truly appreciate it, man. You got anything fun going on for the weekend?
Probably not. I raised 2 kids. My wife is a breeder of a crazy looking cat, so we have 8 cats in the house. So between working on music and activism and keeping my house from blowing up, probably not. My days of partying are long over.
I hear you.
But I really appreciate your guys' time, letting me have a chance to speak to your audience, and you asked some really important questions. So keep doing what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. It's a pleasure for me to actually talk to you. I actually do follow you on social media. I'm sorry I got in a little late, but like the World View album 5 years ago, I've actually been one of the people I used to listen to that. I always was wonder who's this Awkward guy. And so when I heard you were coming, I was like, hey, I have to be on that. I definitely have to, get the opportunity to talk to you. So, I definitely do appreciate what you use your platform for and how you actually do advance the Black people as a movement. Even though you're a white guy, being an ally to us it's a blessing, and definitely do appreciate you.
My pleasure, man. Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Awkward, my man. Appreciate you, man. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Peace. Yes, sir.
You've been listening to the Point Noted Podcast with Johnny B and Rashad B. Follow us on Twitter at PTNoted and Instagram at Point Noted. Hit the subscribe and follow button to follow us and check out more episodes of us talking a whole bunch of shit. You've been noted.